All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about vibe coding. What we'll do is we'll do a pretty simple demo, putting together a quick web app in like maybe 15-ish minutes, just to demonstrate how it's done, the basic iterative process. And then from that, we'll do a little bit of Q&A. About myself, I'm Dylan. I'm here at Worldwide with Michael, my co-founder. I've been a software engineer professionally since 2013, so I've done a lot of coding, a lot of working at, existing companies, did a bunch of startups, two of which went through YC. I did another one a few years ago as AI was booming. During that time, I learned to use AI in code. Like a lot of my younger teammates used it, and they kind of hooked me on it. Like most people, about a year ago, I started using Cursor to actually as a replacement for GitHub Copilot. And in the last couple of months, I've been kind of getting into vibe coding, seeing it as it boomed. I was interested in that as well. Um, so I want to do a demo for vibe coding and maybe talk through a little bit of Cursor. So let me share my screen. We did a whole session on Cursor a few months back, so I'm not going to do a big introduction. All right. So here's basic Cursor. Here's an existing one like what we're going to build is just a basic note-taking app. So you can, give it a title, give it your note body, and then click into it. Yeah, this one doesn't have it. And then it also does like an AI analysis of the notes, giving suggestions, highlights, things like that. It persists, so you can, refresh, you can add things, refresh, come back, and it all persists. Um, so I think maybe to start, I could give a good definition of vibe coding. I think maybe different people would give a different one, but for me and from what I've seen, it's basically asking an agent, in this case, we'll use Cursor, but to build things for you in an iterative way. So if you just give one prompt, it builds it. I wouldn't say that's vibe coding. That's more just generating something. It really is like has to be the coding process of adding features, adding new features, maybe even removing them. But you do so without any care, concern, or in some cases, even understanding of the underlying code base. So like I said, here we'll use Cursor. For those not familiar with it, it's pretty simple. It's a fork of VS Code. So you can edit code traditionally in it. I think you can come pretty close to turning off the AI features in general. It just has a built-in, it uses AI to make suggestions that are pretty good. But where it really gets the power is it has built-in chat. And then in the last few months, that built-in chat now has an agent mode. So I can ask it, hey, add these features, and it will go through all the files, adding the features, and then I can accept, reject them, things like that. It can run like command line and all of that AI generated. So here, this is an existing project. Let me start a new one. Um, Okay. So the first thing you need when vibe coding is good prompts. So I have I'd say they're good prompts, small prompts here though. You can get as in-depth as you want. If you want to build something huge, add a new huge feature. I mean, just like you can with any LLM, you can get, a 10 paragraph prompt going super into detail about data structures and all of that. For our case, I want to do this in really rapidly. So I just have a simple prompt to get started and then a couple to add new features. So for the first one, I'm just gonna tell it, utilizing Next.js, AntD, and Tailwind, and Zod for typing, pretty typical web app stack. Build a note-taking tool, make sure it has basic features, a home page with the title field and text area. Below that, make a list of all previously saved notes. If I click into one, open up a note page. And then on that note page, make sure there's a back button. Also, make the design pleasant and straightforward. So here in Cursor, I have nothing. This is an empty folder. Just create a folder, open it in Cursor. I'm in agent mode. I can just paste the prompt and let it do its thing. Takes a few minutes. Okay, it takes a few minutes to do it. So by default, it does. where I have to actually run the command. I have to tell it to run. This is a lot safer. Like security people would probably say you should do this. You can tell it to auto run, basically what they call YOLO mode, and it will just, as it spit out commands, it will run all those commands in the command line. Can be dangerous. I don't know, what they like already I've run it and it like will reconfigure my actual system, so something to keep in mind. But if you do that, then you can just run it and it'll go. See, it gets an error, it fixes errors as it goes. And that's going to take a few. So that's going to take a few minutes. So while that's running, I can talk a little bit about so YOLO mode is just really auto run. You can configure it. So right now I have it set where it's just going to run anything, but you can come in here and you can actually whitelist, blacklist, add different files and things like that to make it a little more secure than what it currently is, which is probably will just do anything it wants to do.
Hey Dylan,
Yes.
quick question for you.
Yep. Go for
That,
it.
that initial prompt that you put together, how long did you spend sort of refining that? And yeah, I'm curious, maybe just one or two comments on that.
So the initial prompt was really fast for me because I kind of knew, like I knew that it like the more vague I am, the more it's going to be like I can't determine how it's going to output, but also like I've done where I try to do one sentence prompts and then it doesn't even run. So I try to tell it, in my case, like I'm telling it the stack and everything just because I know a good stack and I want it to all work together nicely. So that's a pretty quick prompt. This is also a really short demo. If I was going to build like an MVP that I'm looking to get in front of somebody, I would probably spend a lot more time and I would go into a lot. Like there would be more than just this, there's two, three simple features here. Depending on your feature set, depending on how complex the app is, I mean you could probably get, three paragraphs just on the initial prompt.
Got it. Cheers.
Yeah.
And on the prompting side, as you're deciding different stacks, for people who don't know what they don't know, have you used Cursor Chat or other LMs to help make decisions, like what stack to use or how to like meta prompt almost, prompt to then get that prompt? Do you have any tips there for getting started?
Absolutely. I mean, I do that even in non-vibe coding, like coding to see what's the best UI kit to use. I think you need to verify it because I've had times where like, these things can be out of date, they can hallucinate, they can recommend something, and then you go like for specific use cases, you may want some component that you're envisioning, you ask about it, and then it tells you some UI kit or something that doesn't have that component, or it's a lot of work. So like at least now, the state we're at now, there's going to be that verification step, but absolutely you can use those to even figure out the tech stack. And you don't have to like I think you could probably be really specific in your prompt about what you want to build. In most cases, it will probably pick a good tech stack for you. Okay, it says it's running. Let's bam, here we go. Terminal. Okay, let's test it. All right. So I think right now this works basic. I think on refresh it will go away. Exactly. So then I added a follow-up to that one, because the iterative process. So on that page, want to add a section called highlights and suggestions for this section. Again, I'm kind of telling it the tech stack, Let's use the OpenAI API with the 4.0 model to get some reflections and potential suggestions to resolve pain points that the person wrote the note could use. First, before doing that, you want to accept, say it works nicely. Again, maybe. There we go.
Hey Dylan,
Yes.
that in your prompt you included OpenAI API with the 4.0 model.
Yes.
What could you just comment on, like, what was your reasoning behind that choosing that specific part of the prompt?
Speed. 4.0 is really fast. It's crappy, but it's really fast. So for like 10-minute demo, I think it works really good to be able to show. If this was a live app, I would maybe either let the person choose if they wanted quick versus accuracy, or I would just go with one of the newer models.
So you're instructing Cursor to use the OpenAI API. Is that, am I understanding
No, no,
correctly?
no. So what it does here, without actually diving into the code, what it's going to do is it's going to this application itself, the web app, will make calls to OpenAI.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that worked. Okay, let me add my API key. No, no, no. So bug. Hmm. Yeah, maybe that we'll see if it can fix its own bug.
Cool to see how you debug as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I ran this. This will be the fourth time I ran it. The other three times it did not hit this bug. So this is like, of course. I see. So it's even trying to save to local. So that was actually going to be the third prompt is persistence. So it looked like it kind of got ahead of me and which is good. It should do that because we want persistence, but maybe that's the source of the bug here. Okay, let's see. Okay. Um, These are some from yesterday, so see if they're still broke.
And Dylan, as you're going between the platform and the code, maybe just narrate a little bit what's happening. 'Cause it might be hard to see like what the code is. So just even comments of like, oh, that's an interesting decision, or oh, now I'm going to test this. Just helping us understand kind of what you're composing between.
Sure. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily watching the code. I mean, for it seems like it's wanting to save it to the local store and then read from that. Kind of similar to what it was doing a second ago. I think that could be one of the big problems with this is that it can get caught in its own, like a constant loop where it tries one thing, you ask it to do another, it tries the other thing. Say that still doesn't work, then it goes back to thing one and loops between the two. Let's see. Hmm. Trying really hard not to just look at the code myself and fix things. Hmm. I got you. Maybe it's this.
What'd you find?
So in that case, it's saying it doesn't see the open AI API key. So maybe the error it's throwing is just leading it in the wrong direction. I'm gonna see if it can fix it based off that. Hmm. Let's see if that works. Let me shift this back for a second.
We also have a question coming from the chat of where you're running the app. It looks like local, and is that the default for Cursor?
Yes. Yeah. If you're doing work on Cursor, you're probably running locally. There's ways where you can work, some people work off like an AWS instance or something like that. But I think it's pretty typical to use locally. The errors.
And that error code you're getting from your actual web app itself.
Yes.
Okay.
So here we go. I think it's trying to run this in the browser, trying to run OpenAI in the browser. browser. So I'm gonna see if I can get it to create an API remote. Maybe I can also get it to not throw this. Maybe at least show the note and not, even if the AI doesn't work.
As you're trying to fix this bug, when do you think about when is it worthwhile to kind of revert back and just start from scratch? Because it took like 3 minutes, 4 minutes to generate the code versus like really going through and trying to fix could be like spaghetti code at this point as a bug. Like, how do you think about going through and really fixing it as it sits versus going backwards and just like starting fresh again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that can depend. It's probably better to just start over. I mean, my hope was that it would quickly fix, but I think like once you get into the 20-minute mark, it's probably time to just start over. So maybe that's a great idea. And what I could do instead is just try to one pass the as a prompt.
It was interesting you saying that in the lead up to this demo, had tried it 3 times successfully. So that's in for helpful information for me to know that if it's like not working for some reason, it can be useful just to like start from scratch.
Yeah. And let's take the original prompt. Let's say. Maybe while we let this one build, we could do a little bit of QA.
Yeah, so we have a question from Anu in the chat who asked for non-coders, like how viable is vibe coding to get to a legitimate avenue of something into like a product out? Or is vibe coding really just augmenting software engineers and developers who already have the experience? Like how do you think about those two paths for people who are vibe coding right now?
I think um in the MVP stage, I think it can totally supplement someone who doesn't know how to code yet. Like you might run into if you run into issues here, I don't know. I mean you could always restart, like you were saying, Michael, but you could also like it's pretty quick to ask someone for help and you don't actually have to know code, like post online or post on Reddit or something like that. So I think it's very viable. And if you only care about getting an MVP, I think it's viable and you don't necessarily need to even care about learning to code. I do think it works better as a supplement for people who do know how to code though. It's a much better autocomplete IntelliSense as it used to be called, and I think that is probably where most of its use is going to be.
And as a follow-up, one of the questions we got getting ready for this workshop was, as you're working on an MVP and there's different things to integrate, be it databases, be it external APIs, like you're working with the OpenAI API right now, do you have some best practices for how to start connecting what is a very easily to generate front end, which might be a little bit more tedious back end?
Mhm. Yeah, I would almost do that in two stages. I would at least spec out what the data is going to look like with a model, first for the back end. It's pretty good. You could vibe code the back end. I think if you just tell it what you want to do, it's going to do a lot of guesswork on building those data structures, building up that database and things like that. It may choose a database for you. I haven't done that. I always like I have a pretty standard database stack that I work with always that I would, wrap around. So I would do that. I would almost like come up with what you want the data to be. If you're going to vibe code it, vibe code just the data structure and then like the back end around that data structure. And then you could do the front end finally by passing in those like the types for those data structures.
That makes sense. So there's even some bit of just like planning that's even helpful before jumping right into the agentic mode for Cursor, just being able to figure out like the data structure, for example.
Yes.
And then Noah asks, what are your thoughts on importing an existing code base, like a GitHub repo to set up a structure versus starting from scratch and just initializing from a prompt?
I've done a little bit of that. It can work. I think with me, the problem has been like a lot of the code bases that I would work on are a couple years old and they're pretty big. And so you get to a point where the context window like is not going to be contained. So that can be okay to work with some files, but like I've had some pretty horror stories where it gets loose, and it will like make big changes to files. So I would say really watch it, at least until you're comfortable with it if you're planning to do that.
We have another question coming in. When does it make sense to start transitioning from vibe coding to just start learning more full stack frameworks like Mern, Rust, Lint? So like really like how far can vibe coding go? And when do you start making the shift of like, okay, now I have an area that I should start backfilling or learning?
Um, I think it makes like a cop out answer would be as soon as the thing you vibe coded makes you money and you can pay, like you can afford to do that. Um, I don't know. Like I think that depends on what you want to do. If you want to actually learn to code, then do that, and that's great. If you don't want to learn to code, though, vibe coding can also be an avenue to building an MVP that gets you funding or starts bringing in revenue where you can hire someone else to do that. So it depends on do you want to learn to code or not.
That makes sense there. Another question was in terms of like IP ownership. If people are using different UIs online, you're taking a screenshot and you're replicating another application. What's the line between like replicating and copying something because it's a framework or it's something best practices versus just like stealing it? Like, are there different? Is there a line there in the coding world?
I don't know. That may be a better question for a lawyer. I think that's something that's still being de determined. I don't know. I think with art, it was stated like if you generate it, the art can be yours, but so it's never the company's. But I don't want to give a specific answer because I don't. That's like an evolving legal landscape.
That makes sense. And I think general best practices for code is there's not a lot of patent protection just for like algorithms or front end. So it's really like what you do with that. And yeah,
Mhm.
probably, like you said, outside of the scope for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair use, as Eric was mentioning. Someone asks, how do you deal with security concerns? So one of the biggest things on X is people like hacking other people's web servers. What are some things to just take note of when you're building up security and building a web app?
Yeah. That's a tricky question because I think for me, like I did a couple year degree in information security, so I have a lot of experience with that as well. For people who don't, I think like having someone who knows their profession, like it's probably worth paying them if this is something you're going to get out in public, or just don't have any sensitive data until like I've seen people on Twitter who do that. Like you put it out there, it goes viral, someone's going to hack you, and then it's like free pen testing. Just make sure you have good backups and there's no sensitive data until you know it's secure. But that is a big concern. That's the biggest concern. And if it's a serious application, it's worth paying a consultant, a couple hours. Like these apps are small enough that in a couple hours, the average consultant can probably tell you, a list of what you need to fix.
We got another question in from Deep. Should we use cursor rules or should we use some kind of some different rules or just straight away use the tools as like cursor comes in, like you were mentioning YOLO mode on and off?
Um, Yeah, I don't know. I think like we were just talking about security from a security standpoint, I would advise against YOLO mode and I would like verify each command. I don't think that's practical though. I don't think for most people that's something they're going to want to do. I think if they're going to want to vibe code, they're going to want to just go into it and do it. So I would say YOLO mode works for building, but just you need to understand that it's probably going to run commands against your system. It's not going to run administrative commands like here. It's not like it's going to install a backdoor or something, but it may like completely reconfigure. Like I have a dev environment already, and it's made changes to like the JavaScript engine that I'm running and things like that.
That makes sense. We're right at time. Anything you want to end on? And for anyone who is on the call and has additional questions, drop them in the chat. We can stay a few minutes after. But yeah, anything you want to end on, Dylan?
No, no, it's good to see. I wish this would have came like I had the previous one that I started with. I wish it would have just worked within 10 minutes there, but you can kind of see the process, some of the pain points, and that is why it's vibe, it's like eight. Usually people would say you could spend like 5 hours instead of 5 days doing something. So
Yeah, and it's also nice to have a live walkthrough. Like even David was mentioning, it's nice to see that hey, 3 out of 4 times it works. The 1 out of 4 times you just have to redo it. So it's helpful to see the honest walkthrough. And we got another question coming in from Deep. What are some of the challenges with vibe coding that's not well suited for like enterprise adoption? If you know of any particular roadblocks or challenges there.
yeah, I think like the things we just mentioned are basically the huge blockers. Like enterprise are going to have big code bases. Even what you think is a simple app for enterprise, like they do have auditors. They want things to be well documented, like chartable, or however you want to say it. So like even a small system has like 3 to 5 times the code you're going to see at a startup. Everything. So the context window, it's just not going to fit. And they're going to want to verify everything that happens. If you try to run cursor on it, it's going to make big changes and they're going to say, okay, I need you to tell me exactly every change that was just made and describe why. So that, and then security is always the biggest one. They're gonna have security auditors and they're gonna get mad at you if cursor does something stupid and you as the expert didn't catch it or didn't do it correctly.
Yeah, and I'd say for anyone here who's thinking about enterprise solutions too, one of the best practices I've seen in San Francisco is large companies are actually building out their own version of Cursor. So if Cursor is a fork of VS Code with agentic abilities where you can just send any bit of code to an LM and it generally will be able to use either a code interpreter tool or make sense of it. So like large companies like Google, they've been on the Lex Friedman podcast talking about they have internal tools. Just met someone at Airbnb who's got their own different versions. So when you start thinking about Cursor also is internally might make sense to see like, hey, do we actually have a large enough code base and does it make sense to set up something internally which can be more secure, more private, and you have control over where your data goes, regardless of how you're setting up the API calls with LLMs.
Yeah. And there are free, I can't think, there's an open source version of Cursor that is a VS Code fork. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but it's in pretty active development and you put your own API keys. They don't send they don't have their own servers. They have like a Discord server where the work gets done in a GitHub. So there's definitely free alternative. And there's even command line. Like there's a whole movement on Twitter where people just use like command line versions of something like Cursor to generate code and insert it. So you
Yeah,
don't
and
have
even
to use these paid tools.
and even OpenAI's latest release with 4.1, they have Codex, which is right in the command line too. So I know that's one path too. Deep asked, what are some resources you recommend to just start working start improving on Vibe code flows specifically?
Yeah, I can post a couple links. I think Cursor itself has a pretty good documentation around prompting and agent mode. And then there's a few links that I found where it's like good prompting styles and like how to do the prompts. Like here I try to do the iterative 1, 2, 3. That in practice, if when you're actually building something, you're gonna have to do that because you're gonna do something, think, oh, I need to fix this. And so there's a way of structuring those prompts and those follow-up prompts to make sure. So I would check Cursor's website. I also think like YouTube and Twitter are always great. Just get like follow the people who do that and they'll give you like tons of wisdom.
And I would add also on that is I think we're in an age where the tools are getting better and they're improving quicker than people can keep up with. So one of the reasons we want to do this vibe coding session is be able to show like, hey, in 20 or 30 minutes, you can get all the way through to some kind of working application. And there might be functionality or bugs you have to kind of get through, which is part of the coding process. But one of the best ways to get a sense of what these tools can do in flows is just build yourself. So if you've got like 1, 2 hours in the week, like on a Tuesday afternoon or a Friday, Saturday morning, just being able to work with the different tools yourself, I think unfortunately there's so much that some of it isn't documented, some of it isn't. There's so many specific use cases and questions. One of the best ways to kind of get through that introduction of improving your own flow is just trying it out, seeing how far you can get, seeing what those questions are, which might have like paid routes to unblock, be it paid security consultant, or you might be able to just figure it out.
Yeah.
Awesome. We got time for a couple more questions. If you've got it, feel free to drop it in the chat. We've got a speculative question. Do you think Windsurf, after being acquired by OpenAI, will be better than Cursor?
Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I want to say no. I think when things get bought, they always get worse. But OpenAI has been pretty good. Like I think their even if their LLMs aren't the best, their chat experience is pretty amazing. I mean, they've had memory and things like that for a lot longer. That makes it really hard for me to go with Claude, even though I know the models are better. So if they bring some of that product mentality, maybe, but then that's a like a double-edged sword. You know, that product mentality may enshittify windsurf. So
And
yeah,
maybe
I don't
a
know.
different way to phrase that question is, what do you think are some of the biggest opportunities for more functionality? Because we're in like just the beginning for vibe coding and these tools being helpful. So like in the next 3 to 6 months, what are some things that you're seeing? Could be advancements in reasoning models, could be the integration for like multimodal in chain of thought, or it could also just be larger context windows. OpenAI just released million context windows, and it seems like the number one goal for that is to just ingest entire code bases in one prompt. So where do you kind of see new features being released kind of month over month that will make these tools better as a starting point?
Yeah, so definitely context. I also think cost is probably the biggest one. And then in terms of product, I don't know, like this is speculative, but I think something we've talked about is interface. Like right now, it's literally just traditional code interfaces with like chat added on, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think there's probably a better interface for people who don't care about like writing code in the traditional sense, maybe more graphical. Or even more like maybe three-dimensional ways of viewing it rather than just viewing it as a bunch of text.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just being able to understand code bases more than just linear command line style, line by line. And the last question we wrap up on is, do you have an example from your chat history where you had an aha moment when vibe coding? Some deep just asked if there's a prior example that you wanted to either dig up or just talk through.
I probably don't have one on the spot here. I could probably follow up with that though, dig up some cool things and send that in an email or something.
Cool. And I say for follow up, we'll send everyone the recording. And also, if you have other questions that we didn't answer, just send us a message. Right now, we're full time helping people build sprints. David's on this call. He's starting his first vibe code sprint after building voice coding agents. And so, yeah, if you have questions we didn't answer, just feel free to follow up and email directly.
This is awesome, guys.
Yep. Thank you guys.
Thanks for joining. Thanks, David.